Hey everybody, this is Heather Vickery. Welcome to this week's episode of the Brave Files podcast. Here in Chicago, we are on week 2 of shelter in place and self-quarantine due to the coronavirus pandemic. The kids are out of school for the unforeseeable future, and most of the people I know are looking for new, inventive, and creative ways to do business. Are you one of those people? If you are, I urge you to join us in my free Facebook group, Brave on Purpose. That's where you can go to get support, guidance, and collaboration from an entire network of people who don't want to just sit idly by and let this virus suck their lives and their businesses into its vortex. Simply search Brave on Purpose in Facebook and you'll find us. I've also decided to reopen the doors to my signature program, Intentionally Brave Entrepreneurs. This hybrid program combines coaching, masterminding, training, and continued accountability to help entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs build, grow, and bravely do hard things to achieve true success. If you're interested in learning more, just visit us at vickeryandco.com and click the link at the top of the page, or you can email me, heather@vickeryandco.com. This is a very limited time offer, so act now if you don't want to stay stuck and scared. All right, so I am loving this week's episode. I had the privilege of talking with Non Wels. He is a mental health advocate, a writer, and an empath who grew up in a violent household, and he also battled anorexia for years. Non shares his path towards healing, and he reminds us that there isn't any bravery without vulnerability. We discuss how empowering it is to recognize our own unique needs and that everyone's voice is valuable. We all have a story to tell. We also dig into being an empath and why boundaries are so necessary for an empath to live a healthy life. As a fellow empath, this was incredibly important and wonderful for me to hear. So I hope many of you out there will take advantage of this conversation. Given the uncertainty of the world today and the unique challenges we're facing, I know you're going to love this episode. So sit tight, grab something wonderful to drink, and take a listen to this week's episode.
Empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding.
This is Heather Vickery, and you're listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. When we choose bravely in big and small ways, it powerfully elevates our lives. I hope these stories connect with you and encourage you to embrace bravery in every possible way, day after day. Together, we can build a movement of courageous living that enriches both our lives and our communities. And if you enjoy the show, I ask you to please share it with others. Maybe think of someone who you want to choose bravely right alongside you. Thanks for tuning in. Now here's the show. Hey everybody, this is Heather Vickery. Welcome to the Brave Files. Today I am welcoming Non Wels to the show. He is a self-proclaimed feely person, which got me right from the get-go because I am also a feely person. He's also a mental health advocate, writer, dog lover, runner, and empath. I invited him here today because he's doing some really fantastic stuff out in the world, including his podcast, You, Me, Empathy, which is a safe space for others to share their own mental health stories. And he believes deeply in the power of vulnerability, empathy, and emotional wayfinding, hence his 3 words, as integral foundational elements to recover and deal with mental health issues. So, Non, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am delighted to have you, and I'm going to have to work really hard to get your name right because it looks like Non, but it's known. So if I screw up, will you be patient with me?
Of course. I've been patient with people my whole life. It's just what it is.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. We met online through the lovely Facebook group for podcasters, and I just was really connected to sort of how you move through the world and how you're helping support other people on their, health journey, not just mental health journey. I think it's a well-being journey as well. And I'd love to let our listeners know sort of what what took you down that path? Tell us about you.
Well, thank you. It's very generous of you to say that. For me, it kind of started in childhood, I would say. I was a very sensitive little boy. I still am a sensitive little boy. And, raised around a pretty violent father who scared me and terrified me. And sort of my sensitive, feely, empathic response to that was to shut down emotionally. And I built this sort of guard around my heart that eventually kind of, it served to protect me for a while, and it eventually hurt me, and as I grew into adulthood, that sort of guard essentially sort of kept me from doing the emotional inner work that I needed to do. Eventually led to sort of depression, anorexia, almost dying. Wow. And through the last 15 years or so, a journey of therapy and kind of realizing how important empathy and sort of that vulnerability and the emotional wayfinding piece have been sort of integral to my own health and recovery. And so wanting to create that space for others has been sort of like my mantra and my passion.
I love that so much. I am also an empath, and I have 4 daughters, and one of my daughters is very clearly an empath. And as an early teenager, it is so difficult to watch her navigate that. It's kind of something you have to just learn how to use properly, right? As an adult, it's definitely a benefit, but until you recognize how to use it in your favor and in others' favor, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. You're absolutely right. It's exhausting, and it could be real damaging if you don't know how to use it, because with that inner looking, with the empathy piece, you have to create boundaries. You have to kind of be mindful of how it works for you. I'm an Enneagram type 2, so I can I can very easily sort of shift into being almost emotionally manipulative, right? And so I have to be mindful of that. It takes work.
Have you all all of you listening, have you taken the Enneagram tests? We're going to link to it in the show notes. You can call in and let us know what your number is. My number changes every time I take the test. Is that weird?
I don't know. There could be an Enneagram type that features that sort of vacillation. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to find out. I'll take it again and we'll put that in the show notes as well. But I'm sometimes a 3, and sometimes a 7.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know what that means. Maybe you know more about it than I do. Maybe it's my mood.
Could be your mood. Yeah.
Answer the questions differently each time.
Well, I think the thing with the Enneagram is that the idea is that we have all types in us, and the capacity for all types. So I think that, maybe you're just feeling one type in that moment.
Yeah, I think that could be it. I have been following a positive psychology course. I'm getting a certification in it, which is fascinating. And I've just learned about the 24 key character strengths that we all scientifically have. So we can link to that also. You can take your own VIA character strengths test through AuthenticHappiness.org. Have you done this? Are you familiar with it?
I have not. I'm not familiar.
It's really, really cool. And your top 5 character strengths may surprise you, and then to see how you use them in the world. And there's some really cool science behind, rather than doing all of the work to try and have the other strengths come up, just focusing on the strengths that you have and using those make us happier, more balanced folks, and that we have more to offer other people. It's really cool stuff.
So, that sounds great.
Anyway, we sort of derailed there just a little bit, but I am super into it right now. So what part of, well, first of all, how old were you when it occurred to you that this sort of armor you had was more damaging than helpful?
I guess it was in my late teens through 20s. Okay. And that's kind of when my anorexia when that took hold, around 18, 19. So it was around that time. But it took a good decade from that point to really kind of come to terms with that and figure it out.
Sure. So if it's okay, I didn't get any, don't ask this question from you.
I'm an open book.
Anorexia, and first of all, I should clarify, I don't know what your pronouns are, how you identify.
He, him.
Okay. So then I can ask this question without sounding like an asshole. We don't talk about anorexia in men and boys very often. It's not something that most people think about. I would be interested to hear sort of what that process was like for you, and if you think it was different for you than it is for female identifying folks.
Sure. I think it is a good question. I do get it from time to time. I think that I think being raised around a father who is very masculine, very toxically masculine and deeply arrogant, I know that I kind of developed an aversion to what that sort of societal interpretation of manhood meant. And so I think I got a leg up in that regard. But I think that honestly, it's a human thing. And that's how I try to look at it. I think it's, our identifiers are these things that help us identify who we are as feely humans. I think those are important, but I think what is also important, and we should have both, is the fact that like this is a human condition. Yeah. Right. And it is a condition that leads to the most deaths out of all of them.
Wow.
Eating disorders in particular.
I did not know that. But I'm so grateful that you're sharing this information with us and then reminding us that this can affect anyone, any human. What are some of the signs? We're going to talk about all kinds of things, but I find this incredibly fascinating. What are some of the signs that loved ones can look for to help support anyone who may be experiencing an eating disorder?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to disclose that I am not a therapist and just a little silly
Fair
boy.
Enough. Just your own life experience. Yes.
I'm just a silly boy who once buried a PB&J in the backyard and the next day ate it. So I'm coming with that level of professionalism. I think the thing about my eating disorder came in a space where I felt like I was out of control. Like I felt like I had no control. And so I used that to control. It wasn't, for me, it wasn't about image. It wasn't about being thin or whatever. It was just about the control. And then, of course, it didn't work. I was an 18-year-old kid. And so I think, to answer your question, things to look for: your kid's withdrawing. I think the thing about any mental health is, the thing that I've learned is, vulnerability is so important to sharing our stories, and to be willing not only to share our stories with friends and what have you, but to share our stories with ourselves, because I think there's so much stigma that exists still that tells us that that we are okay, and that we should be strong, and that we should be brave, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I am so grateful for you sharing that with us. And I agree. I am a big fan of vulnerability. There can't really be bravery without it. Bravery requires knowledge of what you're doing. And often we can go back and look and go, wow, in retrospect, that was brave. And I hear people say that week after week. But to knowingly be brave, to make brave choices, it's all about vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trust. Can you tell us then a little bit about what led you to start You, Me, Empathy, and what makes it, kind of different? We have mental health conversations on this show all the time because there are so many different stories and ways to connect, and no two stories are alike. Yeah. So tell us about You, Me, Empathy.
Yeah, sure. Being raised in an environment where I felt at times was not safe, and knowing that was hard, I wanted to create safe spaces for others. I think ultimately it is our job as humans to create spaces for others to show up, to be
Yeah.
who they are, to allow others to relate to our stories, to connect with others heart to heart, like be the mirrors for one another that we can be. I know just how important that is for just our health and safety. You know, there's so much in life that is not safe. And so You Me Empathy is really kind of giving people that safe space to just be whoever the fuck they are.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful
I love it.
thing.
Yeah. It is a totally beautiful thing. I tend to feel that there are no safe spaces. There are safe people. It's the people that make spaces safe. But there's something really magical about knowing that someone can go to your blog or your website or your podcast and know that they are safe there because the people who created that space have left room for safety, have left room for them. What have you learned through this process that surprised you?
You know, that's a really good question. I led a workshop on empathy at what's called Camp Heal, which is created by an organization called Project Heal, which is a eating disorder treatment group. And I was so nervous going into it. I had never led a workshop before.
Oh, wow.
And going into it, I was thinking, no one's going to sign up because it was sort of scheduled. It was sort of situated where there was a couple other, there was like 3 or 4 other workshops at the same time. So I was like, no one's going to show up for mine. And it maxed out. Like,
oh, wow.
30 plus people signed up, and we were in this tiny little space. And I just, from the get-go, I said, I'm very nervous. I'm anxious.
Good for you.
And people were very just supportive and loving, and I got the most amazing feedback. And so I bring that up because I struggle with feeling like I am not worthy, that I don't deserve love, that I don't, that I can't make an impact. And that's just a lie. That's just my self-limiting belief. And so I've learning that about myself, and it'll probably take many moments like that, and has taken many moments like that to remind myself that I am worthy. But that has been a wonderful, beautiful surprise that people can connect with this empathy thing that I believe so strongly in.
I love it.
Yeah.
I believe that it is an ever-evolving process to remind ourselves that we are worthy of all of the things, even when you get really good at it. I tend to think that I'm pretty good at recognizing it, but I go down the rabbit hole just like everybody else does, and I have to go through all my systems, my tools, and check off the boxes and say, no, this is not whatever happened to make me feel this way. This is probably not about me. Somebody, like, it's often, for me anyway, something somebody else has done or said that makes me feel like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing this work, or maybe no one really does want to hear what I have to say. And I have to just remind myself that's not true. There's proof.
There's proof. Exactly. And there are no shoulds.
Exactly.
I think that's a thing that I've learned is that, I think we need to do you. We need to do who we are. We need to hold on to our the stirrings in our heart and sort of lead with that, because the rest of it is just bullshit and comparison games and all these things that just don't mean anything.
I completely agree. So how do you do you? Like, do you have any particular rituals or things you do throughout the day that sort of keep you in this healthier space, in this track?
Absolutely. I think, it's funny. I am an introvert, and so I do definitely need to recharge on my own and I need that space. But also, I've realized my day job, I work from home, and I'm by myself, just with my sneezy dog all day long, and and I realized that I need people. So connecting with people is a huge part of it. So whether that's through the podcast, talking to people, or sometimes I'll just set up phone calls with listeners who I've never met, just so I can connect with people and listen and be present. Another is just reminding myself to breathe. Like I remember, I remember like growing up, I would write like in permanent marker on my hand, breathe. And it's still a mantra to this day. And so I have to remind myself to breathe. And when I can take 3 breaths, when I can take the time to like do 3 deep breaths, it's huge. It's huge for me.
I feel that. In fact, I got a text message from one of my daughters just a couple days ago that said, "What do you do when you can't focus?" And I said, personally, I stop and I take 4 really deep breaths, and then I close my eyes and I visualize the thing that I want to focus on, and I open my eyes and I start over.
I love that. Also, what are you trying to one-up me doing 4 breaths?
No, just kidding. No, I love that you said that. I do 4, although it was interesting that I said that to her because I do normally work in odd numbers. I like odd numbers a lot, but that felt like that 4. Yeah, maybe because it takes more than 3. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is we each have our own unique needs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And recognizing them is so empowering.
See, I got it right. I got it wrong. Known. I knew that was going to happen.
It's okay.
You are a prolific speaker. I'm confident you've heard that before, not just from me, and creative and funny and entertaining.
Well, you're kind.
I honest. Thank you. I do try to be kind, but in this case, I'm just being honest, and it's pleasurable. When did you, or have you, realized that you had this really personable approach to talking about things that maybe aren't so easy to people to talk about, and decided to put it out there? That's the dog. That's the sneezy dog in the background.
That's the dog, just pattering around. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it came with doing this podcast. So I have been podcasting for about 7 years, but this podcast has been going for a little over 2 years at this point. And well, therapy was a huge part of it, right?
Sure.
Really getting into like talking about my feelings, talking about my stuff, and knowing that if I wasn't, I'll sort of back up. A doctor once told me when I was about 118 pounds and dying, the doctor said, "Your heart's going to stop unless you change something." And so what I changed was my heart. That's weirdly
no, it's beautiful,
poetic, but like I allowed others in. I started looking into my heart. I started being curious about my emotions, and I can't see another path forward. And so having conversations about what makes us human is where it's at. Like that is what makes us interesting, is our feelings, is our emotions, is the inner workings of our heart. Like that is the stuff that I am interested in. Yeah. I don't want to talk about sports or the weather. I don't want to like do small talk. That's boring to me. I want to like know who you are and meet you where you are and see and connect our hearts. Like that is the stuff that makes me so happy to do and just to be there for people. It's both like maybe helpful for others to like relate, but it's also like super enriching for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. I was just on the phone with a coaching client earlier today, and we were talking about who she is, who she wants to be in the world, who she feels that she already is. And she was describing, and I think she listened, so I'm not going to say your name, but hey, if you're listening, I'm sharing your story, it was powerful for me, of what she felt made her a good mother and a good spouse. And I challenged her to take those things and see if she felt them about the world. I believe everyone has a voice. I believe everyone is worthy of being listened to and being creative. And it was just a really impactful thing. So that's what I'm hearing you say, is believing that other people's voices are valuable, and that when we share our stories together, the courage and the strength that we can put out, the change that we can create is really extraordinary.
Yeah. And that's a really beautiful moment you had with your client. I think that's what it is. Like, we are in this together, right? We're connected, whether you believe in sort of the universal connection or if there's a spiritual, whatever you may believe, I believe that we're all connected.
Yes.
And we're better with each other, and we can do more and make more of an impact with each other.
Me too, 100%. So that sort of naturally leads me to asking, which I love this question so much. How do you celebrate, whether you're celebrating the ability to stop and take 3 deep breaths and refocus your day, or something big, or anything? How do you celebrate?
It's a good question. And it's one so celebration in and of itself, I struggle with. My wife reminds me every so often to take time to celebrate, because I will do a thing, and I think deep down I'm proud of that thing, but I have an inclination to just swiftly move on to the next thing without taking time.
A lot of people do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very human. And so I think just being cognizant of that thing in me that wants to kind of move on. And I think that comes from insecurity. That comes from the feeling of unworthiness, the feeling of not being worthy of love, all those things. And so I'm aware of that. And so nowadays, when I accomplish a thing like doing this empathy workshop at Camp Heal, I had these limiting beliefs. I had the sort of the self-hatred, but after I was able to kind of put those aside and say, yes, I'm proud of you. So I don't do much in terms of activity of celebration. I don't go out and, go out to a nice dinner. It's really a sort of an inward celebration. It's really just like, hey, you did a great thing. Let's take a moment to be proud of yourself. And that's a good thing. And, in the case of this workshop, I'm using that experience and developing an online workshop that's an even sort of bigger version of it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm taking that opportunity and saying, hey, I think there's something there. Why don't you use that and sort of use your gifts to maybe reach even more people?
I love that so much. I believe just in sharing that, it's a gift. If something feels good and connective to you and you can build something bigger and touch more lives, listen to that voice. So best of luck with that. Keep us posted on that. An online empathy course, I think a whole lot of people could benefit from.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we get close to closing out this conversation, which I've loved, if you're ever in Chicago, I would love to sit and have a cup of tea with you. If you'd be down with it. I think that would be a really fun conversation. But I get to ask you what your favorite charitable organization is to support.
Yeah, I mentioned them earlier, but it's Project Heal.
I thought it might be.
I had the opportunity to meet a bunch of their team at Camp Heal, and they're just the sweetest, kindest, most warm-hearted humans you can imagine, and they're all just so lovely. And the organization is an eating disorder sort of education and enrichment, and it's very inclusive. It's very about self-acceptance and body positivity and just overall like well-being, and they're great. They're lovely.
That's awesome.
So
thank you so much for sharing that with us, listeners. I always encourage you to go out and learn more about these organizations. They will be our charity of the week coming up, and whether it's like them on social media, share them with somebody else. If you have time, money, resources to support them, do that. This is a really wonderful group that I would love for us to embrace as a community. Non, will you share your 3 words with us one last time?
Sure. They are empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding.
So we did talk about empathy and vulnerability pretty extensively. Just for a moment, touch on emotional wayfinding. Tell us what that means to you.
Yeah, so wayfinding is a fanciful way of saying just exploration,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so for me, emotional wayfinding is being curious about our emotions. When we're feeling a thing, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry, check in with ourselves. Why am I feeling that way? Where did that come from? What's going on there, right? I think we as humans have a tendency to, and I know I do, to kind of ignore that, right? Because it's uncomfortable. But
For sure.
I think in discomfort is where we're going to grow most. And so it's about, being curious, exploring our emotions, figuring out what they mean to us with the hope of gleaning and learning and self-actualizing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love every bit of that. I have a quote that is in a couple books, and I even put it on a magnet that I give out to people that says everything you really want is just on the other side of uncomfortable. And I think you're completely on point, that introspection. Why do I feel this thing? Why does something external make me feel a certain way? All of that is uncomfortable. I think even for people who are really well practiced at it, we don't always want to know the answer. So if you're willing to push yourself into that space, it's there's a lot of magic to be found and an awful lot of growth to be found in that space.
Absolutely.
I have loved having you here to sort of share your perspective and tell us about what you're working on. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Heather.
It was my pleasure. Listeners, we keep having conversations around mental health because there's a lot to talk about. No two stories are alike, and there are no easy steps to follow. We can't give you instructions on how to be mentally healthy. There are all sorts of different approaches for all sorts of different people. And even though they intersect, we want to honor that, and we want to make sure everyone knows that there's nothing wrong with you. You are just the way you're supposed to be, and we just want to help you live your best life. If you like what we're doing, and I hope that you do, please consider joining us on Patreon in order to continue to grow our Brave community and do some big, big things like taking the show on the road and making a scholarship. We make a donation every single month to different charities. In order to do that, we need your support. So visit us at patreon.com/bravefiles, find a level that works for you, and join our Brave community. And I would love to hear what you think of the show and how you're out choosing bravely. So give us a call anytime at 312-646-0205. Thank you for spending your time with us. I hope you're out finding your emotional way, emotionally wayfinding, and I hope you're out every single day choosing bravely. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks. Check it out for yourself and get your 30-day free trial, including one free audiobook. Simply visit audibletrial.com/thebravefiles and voila, free audiobooks. What could be better than that? You've been listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. To learn more about the show, find our show notes, or get some great bonus content, visit thebravefilespodcast.com. And we'd love to know what you think. You can give us a call at 312-646-0205. Let us know your thoughts on the episode, the show in general, or maybe share with us how you're out choosing bravely. This episode is brought to you by Vickery & Co. Success Coaching, coaching that helps you maintain a life well lived and a business well run. Learn more at vickeryandco.com. Our music is produced by Matt Lewis. Follow him on Instagram at mattmmusic or visit his website, theunionband.com. We couldn't do any of this without our extraordinary audio engineer, Andrew Olson. Learn more about him and check out his work at findandrewolson.com. And special thanks to our associate producer, Kim Statler. I'm your host and executive producer, Heather Vickery. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.